No deep philosophical discussion on today's video. Instead, we're going to talk about the mouse and how important it is to your music production. We're also going to check out an urban contemporary hip hop cue on my week 28 vlog check-in. What is up, everybody? This is Dave Croft. First, I hope you are doing well. Thank you so much for watching the video, and thank you very much for finding me. However you found me, this is my week 28 check-in. If this is your first time, I am making a video every single week where I go over a cue that I wrote in the week before. We call it 52 cues. If you are a return visitor or a subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. Speaking of subscribing, if you haven't already, please do consider liking and subscribing the video. Not only does it make me feel better about myself, but it also helps composers just like you find the channel. Also, before we get started, I want to give a special word of thanks to my Patreon patrons, whose very real support makes this channel possible. More information about my Patreon at the end of the video. We're going to be talking about mice, or is it mouses? I know mice is the plural of mouse as an animal, but as a mouse as a device, I don't know. Let's call it mice. Okay, we're going to be talking about mice and input devices on today's vlog. If you want to skip over the vlog and get right to my cue breakdown of my urban contemporary hip hop cue titled Playing Angles, then check out the timestamps in the description below. So yes, we are talking about mice today, and it's not really philosophical and not really deep per se, but mice are really important in the music production journey. And I just wanted to talk about some of the different types of mice that I've used in my production life. And it's really easy to kind of overlook the input device, overlook the thing that we put our hands on, but I think it's really, really important. And here's why. Is because a good mouse has to be comfortable, it has to be dependable, and you have to be able to use it as an extension of your body. And if we think about using the DAW, whether it's Logic or Cubase or Pro Tools or FL Studio, Ableton, whatever, if we think about performing or using the DAW like playing an instrument, then the mouse we use is like the keys on the instrument, or the drumsticks we're holding, or the way the piano feels if we're thinking, and that's the way I think of it. And so we want tools that we use to not only not get in the way of our ability to play the instrument, to perform and to do tasks, but if we can find devices and tools that make our life easier and faster, ultimately keeping us in the creative flow state, then that's the better option. So I'm going to start with the good old-fashioned mouse. This is the mouse that used to come with most Macs. It's the single button mouse that's confused most PC owners. It has a right click, it has a left click, even has some little buttons on the side. I forget what this is. Is this the Magic Mouse? I think it was called. It has a little nub which would always get gunk in it, but really super straightforward, wired, and I used this for a while. I keep a wired mouse handy just in case the mouse that I actively use right now goes sideways. But nothing at all wrong with this. Nothing at all wrong with this. To step up from that, and you get into the wireless. I think actually this one's called like the Magic Mouse. This is the wired version, and they make them now with like lightning adapters, and it's super sleek. I'm not a fan of this guy because it sits so flat. It sits so flat that it kind of hurts my hand after a while, but this guy stays in my backpack. So anytime I'm out and about, I use and I lean on this mouse because it's Bluetooth and it automatically connects. Word of caution for you, make sure that you turn this mouse off before you put it back in your bag. I have a little Ziploc. It's like a pencil case, I think. Actually, no, it might be an old microphone bag that I keep this as well as a few adapters. And I often, or not often, but enough for me to know what is going on. If you leave this on and then you put it in your bag and then the button holds on it and you realize, hey, my laptop isn't responding or my computer isn't responding, check and make sure that you've turned the power off on this. What I don't have is a trackpad, whether it be for your laptop or the little side trackpad that you can use. Really good because it saves space on your desktop. You're not having to move things around. That's one of the disadvantages of using a mouse is you're having to kind of pick it up and move it. And when you're dealing with multiple displays and getting from over here to all the way over there, you feel like you're kind of swiping for days, and that can get kind of old. But so the trackpad has really helped with that. And trackpads come in all different sizes and varieties. The Apple trackpad is really, really good. Personally, I find that there's a lack of precision. And so if you're trying to like nudge EQs and such, just 1 or 2 dB, then I find that trackpads can be kind of frustrating, but they are some of the most ergonomic tools that you can use. I find that trackpads really, really work well for just general computing. But to be honest, I can't do a lot of ongoing work on a trackpad. And that brings me back to my last, the 2 devices that I use most frequently. And I want to bring up this guy to you. I'll put it on this side. This is the Logitech G600, I think. Yeah, the G600 mouse. And this is technically a gaming mouse. It's a gaming mouse. Razer also makes one called like the Naga or something like that. I had one of those for a long time, but it was nearly $100, and this is like $36 or $37 as of the time of this video on Amazon. $37. And here is what is amazing about this mouse, and that is, let's see if we can get that on the video. The side buttons. What you essentially have on the side of this mouse are a numpad. These are number pads that not only correspond to the number pad, of a full-size keyboard, but they're programmable. You can program them to F keys, you can program them to quick keys, key commands, whatever. You can program each of these buttons to specific key combinations that correspond to your DAW. And that is super powerful. Now, I first got introduced into this type of a mouse when I started playing World of Warcraft. And so being able to set up your custom buttons, and if you've ever played World of Warcraft or any MMO, then you know that it's just a sea of button and key combinations, whether it's World of Warcraft or Skyrim or Final Fantasy 14 or whatever. And it's no secret, I'm a gamer, whatever. But this mouse is fantastic for working in the DAW because you have 12 programmable buttons that sit right along the side, and you hit it with your thumb. And it works really, really well. And on top of that, you also have 2 buttons across the top. You have the scroll wheel, which you can also push in and can push side to side, right click, left click, right click, and a third click. And for $37, to have all of these options is comparable to those high-end video editing kind of rigs, those Avid kind of, I don't know, it looks like a flight simulator type of a controller. But this works astonishingly well for DAW usage. It works really well, and I highly encourage you to look at this. If you're into a mouse that you hold with your hand, and if you're not a trackpad, and I'm going to show you the last thing, which is what I actively use in the studio, this would be the way to go. And for $37, It's kind of built like a tank. If anything, it's a little big. And so you have to kind of get used to that. But we'll have a link to this in our show notes in the description below, and you can check that out. It's the Logitech G600, and Razer makes one called the Naga, and the Naga Trinity, I think, has different button combinations that you can put on the side. But to be able to have a full numpad, by the way, this is also brilliant for you Sibelius users, or Finale, where you have the little numpad is already programmed. This is absolutely great for that. So I highly encourage that. But that's not what I use in my studio. I needed something that was wireless. I needed something that had some button functionality that we would find here, some programmable buttons. But back in 1995 or 94, I started using a trackball. And I am of the belief that once you track, you never go back. Once you track, you never go back. So this is the Kensington Expert Mouse Wireless. They make a wired version as well. This is both USB and Bluetooth. So you can use a little USB nub for it, or you can connect via Bluetooth, and it comes with the wrist rest, which is fantastic for ergonomics, and it has 4 programmable buttons that you can also use in combination. And I have programmed these buttons to specific arrow movement or keyboard movement in Logic, mainly being obviously we have your left click and your right click. If I click hold both of those, then that is a click hold. So I can click and then drag things around. I have backwards and forwards, which correspond to the comma and the period, or the left echelon, right echelon on a keyboard. So I can easily go back and forth. If I double click those, if I click both of those at one time, then that becomes a cut feature. And if I am in other software, then that means something different as well. I also have one of these. If I'm in Logic, if I double click them or double tap both of these, not double click, but click both of those at the same time, then it will actually delete and slide everything down, which when you're doing a lot of dialogue editing and that kind of thing, I think in Premiere and in video editing, it's called like a rolling edit. I believe it's what that's called. It may be wrong there, but programmable, and it works really well. It's built like a tank. It's nice and solid. It has a big, hefty, almost like a pool ball size thing. So I don't do like the little fun, like Logitech's trackpads or trackballs just aren't my jam. But this guy right here, the Kensington Expert Mouse, is fantastic. Now, there's also a mouse that I had for a long time called the Slim Blade. It's a trackball, but I had 2 or 3 of them go out, and just not down with that. This guy has been going strong for nearly 4 or 5 years, and it's fantastic. It's wireless, and it's wireless via Bluetooth or via USB, the little USB nub. So once you track, you never go back. Some people hate trackballs, but I love just being able to move around. My hand doesn't have to move. I don't have to swipe. If I need to get all the way across, then all I have to do is just a quick flick of the trackball, and the ball is heavy enough to where its own inertia will carry it over. I like not having to have a giant amount of space on my desk. I like not having a mouse pad on my desk. It just keeps it really nice and clean, and it's wireless. So if I need to go over here, or if I need to move the mouse over there or whatever, then I encourage those. And I'll have a link to that guy in the description below as well. What about you? What type of mouse do you use, and why? I would love to hear your thoughts. You can let me know in the comments below, but it's something to think about. Something to think about, and maybe up your mouse game. So without further ado, let's check out my cue for week 28. It is an urban contemporary hip hop cue called Playing Angles. was playing Angles, and this is urban contemporary hip hop cue, and this was written for a publisher search looking for modern sounding hip hop cues, but used kind of in a tensiony kind of way. And I found that in reality TV, the urban contemporary hip hop cues can be used in place of tension cues. And often because many urban contemporary hip hop melodies have these minor seconds kind of baked into the melody. Now I'm in F sharp natural minor here, but if you look at the second scale degree and the fifth scale degree, those have minor seconds. If the 2 goes up to the 3 or the 5 goes up to the 6, then what you end up with are minor seconds. And these get used quite a lot in hip hop. This minor second adds that little bit of tension. And so this is a call and response type of melody between these two sounds. You know, if I'm looking at my melodic, repeat, repeat, and then wrap up the motive at the end. Nice, a little 8-bar intro. I'm getting away with 8-bar phrases because I'm at 144 beats per minute. Now I'm using, the majority of this is stock Logic. I'm using stock Logic sounds, with the exception of I brought in an outside loop for the hi-hat, pitched it down an octave, and some sweeps and risers and one-shots. And I also brought in an outside sample into my 808s. But these are just stock Logic air bells using the ES2. This is another stock Logic sound called Expanding Pluck. It's a retro synth. The retro synth. These bells using Alchemy, just a bell pad. My E-drums, the trapdoor kit that programmed myself, programmed all these stutter hats and everything. And I've gone in some of these hat parts. I've added an additional, and you can see some modulation effects, which really help the stutters to kind of move across the stereo field. So it kind of moves in. So instead of like going in and automating the pan, throwing a tremolo on something like the stutter hats, which are separate from my regular trap hats. So we have, let me isolate those. And it just adds that extra, putting the actual stutters on a different hat sound adds, and then throwing like tremolo, it adds a little bit of extra depth to that. Then I layered on another hi-hat loop on top of it, which is a splice loop that I dug up, pitched it down so it almost sounds like a ticking clock kind of thing. Some reverses, just to add energy into the phrases and add going into either into a drop or approaching a drop, or into like beat 4 of the phrase. My 808s, like I mentioned, are one-shots from Splice that I dropped in. And I love using Alchemy for this. And I'm pretty sure I've talked about this before, but I could use sine wave and layer in. I could even use the Logic drum synth, which has a really good 808, but you know, there's more you have to do to an 808 to get it really sounding kind of modern and the way it's used in most urban contemporary hip hop cues, and adding distortion and saturation and some parallel compression, not parallel compression, but parallel compression, just to kind of beef it up. And so there's a lot of processing you have to do on that. However, I can take a one shot from Splice and layer it in myself, and it's already done. All of the EQs and everything, all of those effects that need to get done onto an 808 sound are already baked into the sample for me. The only drawback is because I'm using a sample when I'm going up the octave, the sample is moving twice as fast. You can see that sometimes it'll cut out a little early. And so that can be a little challenging because you can see the sample kind of run out of time here. But I do this all the time, and I like using Alchemy because I can load in 4 different sounds. And then I can save this as a patch in my library, which I've done here, called 808 Samples 3. And each of these represents 1, 2, and 3. Each of these represents 4 different 808s that I can either layer together or I can use individually, and they each have kind of a different character to them. So every time I will buy a one-shot from Splice, I'll load it in and save it as a patch, specifically using Alchemy because I can layer up to 4, and it will automatically pitch it for me. So I don't have to go in and tune it. Alchemy does a really, really good job of doing that for me. So that's just really, really, really helpful. Little fat effects onto it. Just add some hard clipping, and that just beefs it up just a little bit, lets it punch through the mix with a little bit of a bass enhancer on that as well. These beach bells, these are also from stock Logic sounds. They're just stock Logic, nothing really to it. A couple of risers that I picked up from Splice. This is a synth pitched riser, and then I have that impact. I don't know why that's called that. Let me fix that. There we go. And cut that off because going into my B section, back, and then a clap impact. As far as the form, we have our intro where we introduce the melody, and then we add layers. We add layers either by adding new sounds or adding density to the layers that we already have. So in this instance, we start with adding octaves to the synth, and then we add harmonies to the synth, bring in some extra percussion, add octaves to the response layer in the hi-hat, then add octaves to the call of as far as the 2 melodies. And so this represents nearly the entire cue. And then we go into our B section, introduce our secondary melody, then rinse, repeat, add layers and density. Then we come back to our A section, add density and layers, and then the final button hitting nice and strong. Lots of stock Logic, but using the minor seconds, which are baked into the natural minor scale between the 2nd and 5th scale degrees to create an element of tension for the cue. So that was Playing Angles. I hope you enjoyed watching that. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the mouse that you use for your own DAW input. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this channel would not be possible without the support of my Patreon patrons. Patrons start at just $1. It's just $1, and all of my patrons get access to my weekly live streams where I will create a cue from scratch live. And so I do that at least once a week. Sometimes it's twice a week, and that is a benefit exclusively offered to my Patreon patrons. You can find out more information by clicking the Patreon link below. As I also mentioned, if you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It really helps composers just like you find these videos and find them helpful. And give me a comment. I would love to hear from you, your thoughts, whether the industry, your thoughts on the topic, your thoughts on the cue, or whatever. But I hope that you had a productive week 28, and I wish you a happy week 29. Until next time, peace.